The whole courtroom stopped breathing when I stood up and said, "Your Honor, my dad is innocent and I'll prove it." I was 11 years old holding this beat-up little folder like it was a weapon, knees shaking so bad I thought I might fall over. And every adult in that room, all these lawyers in perfect suits, looked at me like I was a joke. Let me ask you something. If you were in that courtroom and a kid said she could prove her dad didn't do it, would you listen? Or would you tell her to sit down and be quiet? My name is Rose Parker, and this is the day I defended my dad in court, because nobody else would tell the truth. Before all this, before cops and judges and orange jumpsuits, it was just me and my dad, Daniel, in this tiny apartment on the quiet side of the city. 2 bedrooms, tiny kitchen couch with a rip in the side walls, a little faded, but it was home. On Saturdays, we'd go to the public library and sit in the corner and read together like it was our private world. On Sundays, we'd walk to the park with old bread and feed ducks. At night, he'd sit at the edge of my bed and we'd pray. "Thank you for keeping us safe today. Please watch over us tomorrow." And I would fall asleep knowing I was loved. You know that feeling when you're a kid and you think, "Yeah, this person is my whole world." That was my dad to me. It was just him and me by then. My mom died in a car accident when I was 5. I still remembered her laugh, kind of soft and warm, but the details were already starting to fade like an old photo. So for most of my life, it was Dad holding everything together. He worked as an accountant at this mid-sized company downtown. Nothing fancy, but he wore his best old suit every morning, packed my lunch, kissed my forehead, and said, "Be good at school today, sweetheart," then headed off like a soldier going to war. We weren't rich, not even close. He'd always tell me, "We don't have much, Rose, but we have each other, and that's worth more than money." And I believed him. Still do. Then one day, something huge happened, and for the first time in my life, I saw my dad look excited instead of tired. He came home practically glowing, like his face was brighter than the kitchen light. And he said, "Rosie, guess what happened today?" He told me about this guy, Mr. Richard Stone, successful businessman type, fancy watch, perfect smile, drives a luxury car, talks like money is just air to him. Mr. Stone told my dad, "I've seen your work, you're smart. I want to start a company with you. Not hire him, partner with him. 50-50. Stone and Parker Financial Services." My dad actually said those words, partner, and his voice shook a little, and he told me, "If this works, we could move to a better apartment. I could start saving for your college. We could finally breathe." You ever see hope land on someone's face and you almost want to cry because they deserve it so bad? That was that night. Mr. Stone even came to our apartment once, sat at our wobbly table like it was a boardroom, smiled at me, shook my hand and said, "Your dad talks about you all the time, says you're the smartest girl in your class." He brought me a science book and told me study hard, education is the key to success. He looked at my dad and said, "Family is everything." He played it perfect. We trusted him. For 2 months, my dad worked like I'd never seen. He'd come home tired but happy for once, sit at the table with stacks of folders and spreadsheets and say, "I just have to make sure everything is perfect. Rosie, Mr. Stone is trusting me with a lot of money." That money was $50,000, Mr. Stone's investment to get the company off the ground. My dad handled all the accounting, all the records, every dollar tracked. He was so proud. And then everything exploded in one day. 2 cops walked into his office in front of everyone, walked up to his desk and said, "Daniel Parker, you're under arrest for theft and fraud." People were watching, whispering, pulling their phones out. They cuffed him at his job and walked him out like a criminal. And he kept saying, "There has to be a mistake. I didn't take anything. Check the records. Please check the records." But nobody was checking anything. They just dragged him out. Can you imagine watching your dad get taken away like that? and you're not allowed to help him at all. At school, they pulled me out of class, and there's this woman from child services waiting for me in the principal's office, talking in that soft, fake, calm voice, Rose. Sweetie, your father's been arrested, so for now we'll need to place you somewhere safe. Safe from who I wanted to say. Safe from the man who still irons his old shirts and skips meals so I can have new pencils. That man. That night, they sent me to stay with my Aunt Rachel, and I lay there in her guest room staring at a ceiling that wasn't mine, and my chest hurt so bad, it didn't even feel like crying. It just felt like something was breaking. I didn't know where my dad was sleeping, if someone had yelled at him, if he was scared, if he thought I believed he really stole the money. I couldn't sleep at all. Aunt Rachel took me to see him in jail the next day. If you've never talked to your dad through glass, I hope you never have to. He was in an orange jumpsuit, eyes red like he hadn't slept, and he tried to smile for me anyway. I picked up the phone and said, "Dad, why are they saying you took the money?" He shook his head and said, "I didn't touch a cent. Rose, I swear to you, someone forged my signature. Someone is setting me up." And then he said something I honestly didn't want to hear. "I think it's Mr. Stone." That was the first time I felt real anger. Not scared, not sad. Anger. Because Mr. Stone wasn't just some guy he'd been in our home, he'd called my dad partner. I said, "Why would he do that?" And my dad said, "I don't know." But nothing else makes sense, and then he told me, "Listen, just be good for Aunt Rachel. Go to school, do your homework. Don't worry about me." And I could see it in his face. He was lying to make me feel better. He was terrified. You know what made it worse? The lawyer the court gave him. Public defender. Mr. Roberts. Young, stressed, drowning in cases, papers stacked all over his office, and even he said the words that almost killed me. He told my aunt, "The evidence is too strong. Daniel should plead guilty and hope for less prison time." Less prison time. Like it was already decided. Like this was just paperwork now. Tell me if that was your dad, and everyone around you was already acting like he was guilty. What would you have done? Would you just accept it? I didn't. A couple days later, Aunt Rachel took me back to the old apartment so I could grab my stuff. I told her I was going to my room, but I didn't. I went to my dad's room. My dad keeps everything. Bills, receipts, copies of emails, all in neat stacks on his little desk. I started going through paper after paper, heart-pounding, hands shaking. That's when I found the folder. It was labeled Stone and Parker Business. Inside was a copy of the withdrawal form the police were using, the one that supposedly proved my dad took the $50,000. I stared at the signature on the bottom. Daniel Parker. And I'll tell you something right now, kids know their parents' signatures better than anyone. I've watched my dad sign permission slips, school forms, birthday cards. His D in Daniel is always sharp and pointy like a triangle. His P in Parker is big and swoopy, dramatic. On that form, the D was too round, the P was tiny and tight. It looked almost right, but not right. Somebody had tried to copy him. Somebody faked it. Then I found the bank statement. According to the records, the money was withdrawn on March 15th at exactly 2:30 p.m. My heart started racing because I remembered that date. I dug in my backpack for my school planner and flipped back to March 15th. I had written in pink pen, Parent-Teacher Conference 2. Azuro. Dad came. In other words, at the exact time somebody was supposedly at the bank across town, stealing $50,000, my dad was sitting in one of those tiny kid chairs in my classroom, talking to my teacher about my math scores. He literally could not have been in two places at once. Wait, it gets better. Near the back of the folder, there was a printed email from Mr. Stone to my dad, dated February 20th, a few weeks before the money went missing. And in that email, Mr. Stone said, "This partnership isn't working out. I'm going to need my initial investment back. We should talk about ending this." I read it 3 times. Think about that. He wanted his money back. He wanted to close the business he was planning to pull out. Then 3 weeks later, he runs to the police and says, "He stole my money. I've been betrayed. I'm the victim." Does that make sense to you? Or does it sound like somebody setting up a story? That wasn't even all. I remembered after the parent-teacher conference, my dad took me to the little coffee shop next to my school and bought me hot chocolate. So on the next jail visit, I asked him, "Did you use cash or card?" He said, "Card, I always use my card." When Aunt Rachel let me back into the apartment, I dug through his drawer and found the credit card statement. There it was, clear as day. Corner coffee shop, March 15th, 2:47 p.m. Meaning 15 minutes after the so-called theft, my dad was still on my side of town, nowhere near that bank. Boom. So now, I'm 11 years old, sitting on the floor of my dad's empty bedroom, with a pile of papers in my lap, and my heart going crazy. And I realized something really simple. I had proof. Not feelings, not "I love my dad, so he must be innocent." No, I had timestamps, signatures, emails, receipts. I put everything in a cheap little folder, and I wrote notes in pencil. Document 1, signature is fake. Document 2, bank time doesn't match. Document 3, dad was at school. Document 4, credit card proves location. Document 5, Mr. Stone motive. And I marched that folder into Mr. Roberts' office like I was his boss. At first, he did the adult thing. I understand this is emotional sweetheart. Like he was about to pat me on the head and send me away. Then I laid everything out and walked him through it step by step, and I watched his face change. He went from tired to alert to kind of shocked. He said, "Rose, this is real. You actually found real evidence." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Real hope. Like maybe this ends and my dad comes home. But then the system did what the system does. A week before trial, Mr. Roberts called my aunt. I listened from the hallway. He said, "The school district won't let the teacher testify. They don't want to be involved in a criminal case." He said, "The coffee shop camera footage is already deleted. It only keeps 30 days. He said, "The prosecution says the email doesn't prove anything." And then he said the line that made my stomach drop. "I still think Daniel should take a plea." I realized right then nobody was going to save my dad. Not the school, not the system, not even his own lawyer. So I decided, I'll do it. Which brings us back to the courtroom. Picture this. Wood benches, reporters everywhere. The sound of people whispering like bees, my aunt squeezing my hand so hard, it hurt my dad looking smaller than I'd ever seen him sitting there in an orange jumpsuit with handcuffs on the table in front of him, like he's already guilty. The prosecutor, Mr. James, standing tall in his expensive suit, like he already won. Then the bailiff calls, "All rise," and Judge Harrison walks in. Older man, gray hair, eyes that see everything. And before anybody can start, I just stand up and walk into the aisle holding my little folder, and I say, "Your Honor, my name is Rose Parker. That man is my father, and I will defend him myself because no one else will tell the truth." You should have heard that room. People gasped. Reporters leaned forward. Somebody in the back actually said, "Is this real?" Mr. James exploded. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. Remove the child." The judge banged the gavel and said, "Sit down, Mr. James, this is my courtroom." Now here's where everything turned. Twist incoming. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. Instead of kicking me out, Judge Harrison looked at me and said, "Child, Do you understand this is a criminal trial? This isn't a game. And I said, Yes, Your Honor, I understand, and I have proof, real proof, and nobody will listen to me because I'm only 11. He stared at me for a long time, then he said something I'll never forget. I've been a judge 32 years. I've never done this before, but I'm going to let you speak. He swore me in as a witness on the spot. He let me testify. So I sat in that big witness chair, feet not even touching the floor, and I opened my folder and I started from the top. I told him about the signature, how my dad's D is always sharp, and this one was round, how my dad's P in Parker is big and swoopy, and this one was tiny and cramped. The prosecutor tried to interrupt like, she's not a handwriting expert, and the judge said, the court will consider it. Then I showed the bank statement with the 2:30 p.m. withdrawal time. Then I showed my school planner. Dad at my school, 2,300. Then I held up the credit card bill. Corner coffee shop. Right next to my school, not across town at the bank. And I said into the microphone, unless my dad can teleport, he couldn't have taken that money. The courtroom actually laughed quietly, and the judge wrote something down. And then I pulled out the email from Mr. Stone, the one where he said he wanted his money back. And I said, Your Honor, what if Mr. Stone just took his own money, then blamed my dad so he could get even more and not look like the bad guy? And you could literally feel the whole room turn, like air pressure change. Reporters started writing so fast you could hear the pens. Mr. James turned red. My dad covered his face and started crying. And here's where the whole case flipped. They called Mr. Stone to the stand. He walked in looking perfect, like always, perfect hair, perfect suit, shiny watch, and he tried to play the victim. He said, I trusted Daniel, I invested my money. He betrayed me, I was heartbroken. He sounded smooth, controlled, like he'd practiced in the mirror. People were nodding. That scared me, I'm not gonna lie, because that's what happens in real life. The person who looks successful sounds believable. But then Mr. Roberts, my dad's lawyer, stood up with my folder in his hand, and his whole energy was different now, steady, focused. He asked Mr. Stone to read his own email out loud, the one where he demanded his money back, and said he wanted to end the partnership weeks before the money supposedly vanished. Mr. Stone's face went tight. Then Mr. Roberts said, Where were you at 2:30 p.m. on March 15th when the $50,000 was withdrawn? Mr. Stone said, I don't remember. And Mr. Roberts said, You don't remember where you were when $50,000 of your money disappeared. But Daniel Parker can account for every minute because he was at his daughter's school with witnesses and his credit card was being run at a coffee shop across town 15 minutes later. So help me understand something. How was he supposed to rob your account? Silence. The kind of silence that makes your stomach flip. Then Judge Harrison leaned forward and said, very calm, Mr. Stone, I want you to listen to me. If you lie under oath in my courtroom, that's perjury, and perjury will put you in prison. Do you understand? You could see Mr. Stone start to crack. His face went red, then pale sweat on his forehead, jaw shaking. He tried to talk, and nothing came out. Finally, he dropped his head and said, Yes, I took the money. I forged Daniel's signature. I set him up. That was it. That was the moment. My dad covered his face and sobbed like his body couldn't even hold that much relief. Aunt Rachel grabbed my hand and squeezed so tight it hurt. Reporters almost fell over each other. And me, I just sat there and felt my whole chest open up like I could finally breathe again. After that, everything moved fast. Judge Harrison ordered Mr. Stone taken into custody right there for fraud, theft, perjury. He told the prosecution to drop all charges against my dad immediately. The bailiff took off my dad's cuffs, and I ran. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't care about courtroom rules. I ran to him, and he dropped to his knees and hugged me so hard I could barely breathe, and he was crying into my shoulder, saying, you saved me, sweet girl, and I was crying, saying, I love you, Dad. I love you so much. People in the courtroom were wiping tears. Even the judge had to take off his glasses and rub his eyes. Outside, reporters were everywhere. Cameras, microphones, people yelling questions like we were celebrities or something. My dad held my hand and said, I want to say one thing, and his voice was still shaky, but loud enough for everyone to hear. He said, for 7 months I sat in a cell for something I didn't do, and nobody believed me, not the police, not the system, not even my lawyer at first, and I thought I was going to lose my daughter. Then he looked at me and said, I am free right now because this little girl refused to stop fighting for me. You tell me that didn't break people. Because I watched reporters, actual reporters, wipe their eyes. Now you're probably wondering what happened after. Did we just walk away happy and perfect like a movie ending? Not quite. Life went back to something like normal, but it wasn't the same normal. It was heavier and better at the same time. My dad got his old job back, and his boss actually apologized for not believing him, even gave him a raise, said, you're the most honest man I've ever hired. We went back to our little apartment, cleaned the dust, made spaghetti, ate at our tiny kitchen table like it was a feast. And that first night back, when he tucked me into my own bed for the first time in months, I held his hand and said, Dad, what's going to happen to Mr. Stone now? My dad sighed and said, he's going to prison. He'll have to pay back what he did. And then I asked him, do you hate him? My dad got quiet and said, I'm angry, but hate takes too much energy, and I would rather spend that energy loving you and rebuilding our life. That's the kind of man they almost threw in prison forever. A couple weeks later, Judge Harrison actually came to our apartment in normal clothes, like a regular grandpa, and he handed me this big book called Great Trials in American History and said, I meant what I said in court. You have more justice in you than a lot of lawyers I've seen. If you keep that fire, you could be a lawyer, you could be a judge, anything. And I hugged that book like it was made of gold. Not because I want to be famous, because I finally felt seen, like somebody in power said, you were right. So here's where I leave it with you. Was that justice? Be honest with yourself before you answer. Was it justice that my dad walked out free in the end? Or was it a miracle that happened only because an 11-year-old girl did the work the adults should have done and forced the truth into the light? Because if I hadn't talked, if I just sat there and behaved, my dad would be in prison right now for something he didn't do. Do you think that's fair? Do you think the system works? Or do you think we just got lucky? I'm asking you to really answer that in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what part hit you the hardest. And tell me this. If it were you sitting in that courtroom and I stood up with that folder in my hands, would you have let me speak? Or would you have told me to sit down? Like, share, hit subscribe, and drop your story below if you've ever had to fight for someone you love when nobody else believed them. I promise you, somebody out there needs to hear it.